I'm really excited about today's conversation. We're going to get into Bitcoin, crypto. This is a space that I've dabbled in for the last few years. I'm really excited about what's happening tomorrow, and I'm really excited to have this opportunity today to share with you guys the big development in El Salvador, which is recognizing Bitcoin as legal tender, the first country in the history of Bitcoin to make it legal. Pretty significant development. The entire crypto community is really excited about what's going to happen there tomorrow. So I think I know all three of us have a different understanding of crypto. You guys are a little more politically minded, so I know that we're going to get a little bit into the politics of it. So
Once again, Latinos leading the way in the adoption of technology.
yeah, no, it's a
What?
pretty big deal. The entire crypto community is eyes are on El Salvador, and obviously they're hoping that it's going to succeed because then it's gonna prove that Bitcoin has an actual valid use case. But let me just quickly summarize some of the stuff that's happened in like the last few months, and how it is that we got to this up to this point, because it wasn't even that long ago that Nayib Bukele announced. It was at the Bitcoin conference earlier this year, and it was Jack Mallers, and he runs a company named Strike. So this company Strike, they're building on top of Bitcoin, and what they're doing is they're making it essentially seamless to transmit money from one person to another. And they're using this something called layer 2, which allows you to send money from one person to another essentially without any fees, like cents. And so somehow he ended up getting involved in El Salvador, and then the president found out that they were in El Salvador, and he reached out to them, and then they started collaborating. And then, a few months later, they make this announcement that El Salvador is going to legalize Bitcoin. And they said, September 7th, that's when it's going to take effect. And there's been some protests against it as well, so we can talk a little bit about that. But just, I know I'm saying a lot because I've been plugged into this space, but had you guys heard about this at all? When was the last time that you guys heard about this bill in El Salvador?
Well, I think I heard it from you, and actually the conversation that you did on Bitcoin and sending money to Mexico and other parts of Latin America. So I know that there has a potential to disrupt that space, but would love to hear from Eddy in terms of when was it that he heard it first and some of his initial thoughts on what's going on there.
Yeah, I think I heard about it probably just like 3 months ago. When was that conference? It was actually a very quick kind of rollout, right?
Yep.
And so I've been investing in crypto for about the past year, and so I've been, as a lot of new crypto folks, kind of plugged into a lot of different media sources now that are coming my way. And of course, this was like a big deal for Bitcoin. But I really didn't start getting into Bitcoin until about 6 months ago. I finally realized what the difference was between Bitcoin and all the other altcoins, as they call them, right?
Yeah.
And so I definitely have a different understanding of what Bitcoin is compared to, or a better understanding compared to those other coins. I guess one of my biggest concerns, if you guys want to take it this route, is
Mm-hmm.
what folks are. I think I heard that every every Salvadorian citizen or family, is it, I don't know what it is, it's individual or family, they're getting $30 worth of Bitcoin, right?
Yeah.
Provided by the government. So my concern, and maybe this is more on the Bitcoin market, more in terms of whether it's gonna impact Bitcoin if some of these folks who don't understand what digital currency is and have to buy a loaf of bread or whatever, groceries immediately, if they're gonna quickly take their $30 in Bitcoin and turn them into dollars, right?
Yeah. Which is very likely that may happen. And that's actually a positive, right? A lot of people were saying, well, what's the use case of El Salvador accepting Bitcoin? It's a speculative asset. This country the economy is too unstable. We don't need this right now. But the whole point of, at least one of the main reasons why El Salvador is introducing it, is because it's going to save a ton of money for people that are sending money from here to the U.S. to El Salvador. Because I know when I send money to Mexico to my dad, I have to pay I think I did the math, and for every $500 that I send, I end up paying like $25 to $30 to Western Union when you factor in the exchange rate. Now, when I started using cryptos, I wasn't even using Bitcoin. I was using Litecoin, which has smaller fees. I ended up saving like $20 just on $500. But with Bitcoin, with this Lightning network that they're using, like I said, it's effectively cents. And so when you talk about Bitcoin, you have two different camps in terms of like how they view Bitcoin. Some people view it as a store of value. They think it's going to replace gold, so they park their money there because they think that in the future it's going to be worth more. So they buy, they hold, and they don't want to sell. But then there's also the currency aspect of Bitcoin, which is just transmitting value. So when it comes to the people that are going to benefit from this application of Bitcoin in El Salvador, is people that are just going to send money from their wallet here in the US to somebody that has that same wallet in El Salvador. And what's going to happen is this wallet from Strike, it takes your US dollars, it converts them to Bitcoin, and then it immediately sends them over the Bitcoin network. The recipient in El Salvador is going to receive the Bitcoin, and then they can immediately switch it back to dollars. So the appeal is that they don't necessarily have to hold Bitcoin. They don't have to, because it's very volatile, right? You could get Bitcoin and then next day it plunges 50%. They can immediately. Hour. I'm sorry, what?
The next hour it can.
Yeah, or the next hour, right? If Elon Musk tweets that something stupid, then yeah, it could plunge by 20, 30, 40, 50%. But they can immediately convert it to dollars. And now they have their, like, you could literally send $5 to your cousin in a coffee shop because he says, I came to the coffee shop and I forgot my money. Can you just let me borrow some money or something? You send them $5, they get that money almost immediately. And then they buy their coffee with dollars or Bitcoin if they want to. And that has never happened before. I mean, you can't do that with any other remittance service that you use, whether it's to Mexico or even more developed countries. There's just so the amount,
not at all.
Yeah. Yeah, I hope I answered your question that I think it's perfectly fine if people want to take that Bitcoin and immediately convert it to dollars. I mean, some people are just going to hold it, but others are going to play with it. And I think that's the point, right? The point is to really like get used to the app, download it, encourage people to register with the app, which is a government app that was developed with partnership with Strike, but there's other apps that they can use. So once they get this money from the government wallet, they can even transfer it to a different wallet if they don't want to use the government's wallet. Or they can turn the Bitcoin immediately to US dollars. But the point is to get that engagement with the citizenry, because then they'll start learning about it.
Yeah, I think definitely I agree with you. But I think what we hope to happen is, again, it's you're almost taking it in phases, right? In early adoption, you just want folks to, even go through the process of exchanging it for dollars, right? Just that is going to be educational and there's going to be market activity. But I think phase two would be, Ken, because that's what we're looking for, right? In terms of Bitcoin becoming the currency of the future. Well, maybe 5% of the citizens or residents are starting to, transact only in Bitcoin, and just 1%, right? And then that starts increasing, then we get 10%, and then we start getting, closer to, hopefully at some point a majority, and that's ultimately the use case we want for Bitcoin for the ultimate purpose, right? Which is, or at least the way I see it, which is folks transacting in Bitcoin in this decentralized network, right? Without any, these centralized institutions that have caused all kinds of issues throughout history and to the markets, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, what do you think about that, right? I mean, we'll ultimately want to get a use case, even if it's a county, right? A use case that says, hey, we're 50% of our transactions are in Bitcoin,
Yeah. Not only that, because if it's successful in El Salvador, just the incentives are so powerful that this is essentially capitalism at its best in terms of the best solution, the best technology wins out. How long before people from Guatemala, from Honduras, from Mexico start noticing that, hey, these people from El Salvador are sending money for practically free, for cents. I want in on that. And then they start putting pressure on their institutions to say, hey, how come we're paying $20, $30, $50 just to send $1,000? There's a better way. And then all these other countries start adopting it too. And so, yeah, I mean, that's really why it's so important, at least that this pilot case in El Salvador, that it hopefully it is successful. Obviously, there's ways in which it cannot succeed. There could be a big scandal where a whole bunch of people maybe were storing Bitcoin and their wallets were taken from them by MS-13 or something, right? There could always be. I don't know if you could start talking about foul play from certain banks or agencies that have an interest in seeing Bitcoin succeed, but we can never discount something like that happening. But for the most part, if it just runs its course and it's pretty successful, then within a matter of months or maybe years at the most, you're going to start seeing other countries really pay close attention to what's happening here.
Yeah, definitely. It's gonna be bumpy. I've been hearing about, because think of the corruption and also the foul play that already is going on in whatever legal tender they have now, right? So it's going to happen with Bitcoin. They're going to figure out ways to, especially with the hacking component, right? I mean, it's going to happen. There's going to be story out there, and they're just going to have to, roll with the punches, right? The Bitcoin advocates.
Yeah, and then they might even sensationalize it. They might make it seem like this is something that only happens because you're using Bitcoin. But in reality, if you talk about, let's say, okay, MS-13 went around a community and confiscated everyone's phone and forced them to transfer their Bitcoin to some other wallet, right? Okay, well, they could have easily stood outside an ATM and robbed people as they were withdrawing money from the bank. So bad actors will find ways to steal people's money. So, but because it's Bitcoin, because it's a trial run, because it's the first time, they might sensationalize it and try to scare people by saying that this would have not happened had they just been using the traditional banking system. So we got to keep an eye out for that as well.
Definitely.
The other thing too that I don't know if you guys are aware of, but so the economics of Bitcoin are such that if you are engaging with Bitcoin, then at some point it is in your interest to also participate in the network and validate transactions, essentially, or start becoming a miner. So it's in the interest of El Salvador to also run their own Bitcoin nodes, to also verify transactions on their own, to even mine Bitcoin. President Bukele, immediately after he announced that Bitcoin was going to be accepted as legal tender, he also started talking about his plans for using the country's geothermal energy from volcanoes to tap into it, to then set up facilities where they could mine Bitcoin. And this is pretty revolutionary when it comes to Bitcoin, because for the first time in our history, we can tap into the natural energy of the planet, like geothermal, solar, without having to worry about a major population center being close by. Because the problem with electricity is that you can only transport it so far before you start getting degradation. And it's effectively cost analysis says that you can only be so far from a major hub so that you can deliver that electricity. But with Bitcoin, you don't worry about that. You set up the Bitcoin mining facility where the source is. So they can go to all these geothermal energy from volcanoes that they have. They can set up a mining rig there, and they can start mining Bitcoin, and they can start making money as well from that energy that is on tap right now. So that's actually could potentially start attracting a lot of investment towards El Salvador, and it could actually help grow the economy. I mean, the amount of money that they're going to be saving on remittances alone is going to increase the GDP of the country. Just that alone, because it's such a small country.
What do you know about? I heard about this last week. I mean, what have you heard about this relating to Bukele's plans just to increase tourism and investment? How do you see? And other than that, the geothermal aspect, I think that's a great idea. But in other areas of just investment and getting more foreign companies to come in, how do you think Bitcoin? Because he wants to do that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you could tell he wants more external folks from the outside to come in and put money into El Salvador, right? How do you see the Bitcoin impact that?
Yeah. So there's two key components there. One is that when it comes to a lot of these cryptocurrencies, the uncertainty doesn't help. And so like in the United States, you have this infrastructure bill now that they're trying to find more ways. They're trying to introduce legislation there to tax Bitcoin, but effectively, the way that they're trying to tax it, make it so that they're putting onerous requirements on all these different participants of the Bitcoin network that are practically impossible for them to collect this information. So essentially, it grinds it to a halt. But when you have a country like El Salvador that's accepting Bitcoin as legal tender, and that they're saying that they recognize Bitcoin, then it's very appealing to a lot of companies that want to set up shop there and operate out of El Salvador because there's regulatory clarity. The regulations are not going to change next month or next year. They know that they can set up shop there and that they're safe in terms of their long-term investment or their long-term plans for what they want to do with Bitcoin. And then the other thing is they are incentivizing people to move to El Salvador. So if you're an entrepreneur and you want to build an app on Bitcoin, and again, you want that regulatory clarity and you want a place that encourages you to do that, if you move to El Salvador and you invest 3 Bitcoin into the economy there, let's say you buy a house, as long as you buy the house with your Bitcoin, or you somehow prove that you're going to invest 3 Bitcoin into the economy, you're going to get a special type of residency that allows you to be essentially a legal resident of El Salvador. And so you get those benefits by being a resident, by setting up shop there and setting up your Bitcoin operation out of El Salvador, again, because of that regulatory clarity.
That's interesting. Yeah, I think we'll see because obviously he's doing other things through the law, and just I believe this week the new Supreme Court justices who he appointed after he sacked the previous ones, just approved him to run for re-election. So I agree with you that this technology is great, and my sincere hope is that he is that through this investment, and I think to your point, if the type of investment, jobs, tourism that comes to El Salvador, that's going to create jobs, that's going to create opportunity, that probably is going to be naturally is going to mean there's going to be a decrease in violence. And I know he's also taken a very tough stand on addressing gang violence over there, right? So it could be a combination of factors that could help turn things in El Salvador, which would be great. And the other point is, I know El Salvador was already kind of getting a reputation because of the surfing that is possible in some of their beaches. So I know that there was already attention on it. So it could technically become another Silicon Beach, where
they call it,
you can go over there
Beach.
And get your business and have a good time.
Yeah, it's actually interesting. They call it Bitcoin Beach, which is where this first trial run started with doing payments using the Lightning Network. And I think the appeal of Bitcoin Beach, again, is that a lot of people went there for the surfing. And so that's interesting that you mentioned that, because I think definitely it's a thing now in the crypto community. I think everyone is aware of Bitcoin Beach. Right? There's even a website for it.
I had not heard about that. But playing devil's advocate here, right? I mean, we've had these types of similar types of economic initiatives in Latin America, right? And just let's look at in Mexico, right, with the deregulation of energy, right, under the last sexennial, right? And there's definitely a lot of economic activity, but the argument is always, well, everybody else that came from the outside did well. What about the locals, right? What about the people that need it the most, right? What's your take on that?
I'm trying to think what the parallels would be between deregulation of industries, because essentially what you have there is private industry moving in, and they get to come in there, access to natural resources, cheap labor if they can. But with Bitcoin, you're building a monetary network where the benefit in itself is that people now have the ability to custody their own money outside of the confines of a bank. And in El Salvador, I think the statistic is that like 70% of the country is unbanked, which means that they don't actually interact with the bank in any way. So it's only if you live in the major cities and you have access to the ability to get a bank account that you have it, but most of the population is not banked. So automatically, all of these people are going to get included into the Bitcoin network, assuming that they have a smartphone, which I think these days most people do, and that they download a wallet. And again, because there's going to be that incentive of them receiving remittances from the US, that there's a pretty strong incentive for them to join this network. So there's that benefit already, right? So that's very different than, say, like in Mexico, when you, as you were mentioning, when you deregulate certain industries and then you have private industry come in. Now, when it comes to the companies that are going to come into El Salvador, if they move in there and they set up shop to build, yeah, you could see some issues where maybe they buy up the best real estate. Maybe they start setting up gated communities where only they and their community benefit from it. But I think, yeah, that could happen. But ultimately, as long as these communities, as long as these businesses are building on top of the Bitcoin network and contributing it to it, then those benefits then get passed back to the people that are part of that network. Because the stronger the network is, the more sovereignty the people actually have with regards to their money and for doing peer-to-peer transactions. Because that's ultimately, at the end of the day, that's what Bitcoin is. It's like freedom from the banks and independence and the ability for people to be able to just pay each other without a middleman. So I think that's a huge benefit. But it's really early. It's hard to say how that's going to play out. It really depends on the type of companies that come in and the type of industries that get set up. And also we have yet to see what the benefits are going to be of the mining that's going to be set up from the energy from the volcanoes, the geothermal energy. Because I was even reading that some people were saying that the El Salvador could essentially sell bonds backed by the money that they are going to be guaranteed by tapping into the Bitcoin network to raise money. So they could kick the IMF to the curb if they can make enough money, if they could generate enough interest, enough trust that they have enough energy to mine Bitcoin, that they can then start selling bonds backed by Bitcoin mining. No more dependence on the IMF. And we already know the predatory practices of the IMF, how they put all these countries into debt. When they can't pay their debt, then they go in there and exploit their natural resources. So that's a huge win for the population as well.
Yeah, I had not heard about the energy component, the renewable sources. I'm definitely going to look more into that. Maybe we can have a follow-up on that.
Yeah, definitely. I know that's your field. So if there's some gaps that you can spot, then definitely would love to have a discussion about that.
Let's definitely do a follow-up. I think that's very interesting to kind of self-fund, self-reliance almost, right? With their own natural resources. Now the challenge is geothermal project development is very technical, very expensive. So you're definitely going to get people, external folks come in, right, to work on those projects. They're going to need to be heavily subsidized, which would be, maybe it can be done through bonds. Yeah, that's going to be an interesting route for them to take. But if they have, like you said, the volcanoes, right, and those natural resources that can help really generate the load they need. I mean, it's like having wind in Minnesota, right? I mean, that's a natural resource for them to tap, or just like a coal mine, right? Large reserves of coal.
They definitely are going to need investment money to start developing that, but that's where the bonds come in. And if there's enough faith that they can that they have enough energy, and I think what I read is that there's an entire fault that runs from South America all the way to Mexico, and all along that fault line, that's where you get the volcanoes. So El Salvador is sitting on like a number of volcanoes that they can tap into.
Interesting. So I think it will be a great way to turn the Cordillera de los Andes, which goes all the way from South America up to the north as a valuable resource. So it sounds like the network revolution is at hand in El Salvador, and it would be great if El Pulgarcito de America has the opportunity to be a successful use case for this type of technology. And I think the more I hear about it, the more excited I get about what the possibilities. And I'm hoping that this vision and whoever's going to be implementing this it goes beyond Bukele, because I think it is going to need a lot of folks who have the same vision, who can work towards making it a reality and making sure that that the gains from it really go through back to the country, and that they can help sort of change, change situations in El Salvador pretty drastically. It seems like I'm blanking out on the name of was it Taiwan, Singapore, one of the Asian countries that was able to turn around just by focusing on financing. This could be like the Latin American example of that.
Yeah, I think you're thinking of Singapore.
Yeah.
Yeah, so pretty exciting stuff. And again, tomorrow is the first day that they are. Tomorrow is the first day. Tomorrow is the day that it becomes legal. And there's actually, if you go to Twitter, there's a lot of chatter around the entire crypto community, especially those that believe in Bitcoin, in solidarity with El Salvador, buying $30 worth of Bitcoin tomorrow, because that's what they're giving to every single citizen there.
Yeah, I heard about that. I'm gonna buy my $30 tomorrow as well.
Yeah, and actually they already started buying Bitcoin. So the president announced earlier today that they had bought 200 new Bitcoin, so they have a total of 400, and they're gonna save this, and that's what they're gonna use to give to the people. But they also need to have a reserve of Bitcoin, so that, or a fund where if a business or individuals want to convert their Bitcoin immediately into dollars, then they'll go ahead and use that, and then the government will give them dollars, and the government will hold on to the Bitcoin. I don't really recall exactly how much Bitcoin they would hold on to, but I'm assuming that at some point they would sell it into the market if they needed to.
Yeah, I read about that earlier today. And what's interesting, in general, outside of El Salvador, just Bitcoin and the Bitcoin market is anything really that the citizens are doing, whether they exchange it for dollars, is not going to really matter to the market itself, right? Unless El Salvador decides to sell their 400 coins, right, or whatever reserves, because they're not really putting up their own money right now, right? They're getting Bitcoin for free right now, right, from the government. And so the question is, when will they start getting comfortable, for them to say, I'm going to buy $30 of Bitcoin myself, or $100. Right. And that's going to be, I think, there's going to, that's why we have the protests, right? What do you hear? No lo entendemos. We don't know what you're talking about, right? What does it benefit me, right?
Yeah.
And you're going to have a lot of that. And of course, that's going to be, as we discussed earlier, a big learning curve for folks to actually then start transacting their own value, their own gains, right, or just buying Bitcoin, right? So that's going to be interesting to see, because right now it's artificial, right? 400 coins or whatever, are bought by the Salvadoran government, right?
Yeah.
And so any market movement is done centrally by El Salvador right now, not the citizens.
Yeah, but
right?
Honestly, that's not going to move the market that much, because these days 400 Bitcoin, even if they buy more, it really doesn't affect the price significantly. You have individuals like Michael Saylor that single-handedly buy billions worth of Bitcoin, or have bought collectively billions worth of Bitcoin. I think that, you bring up a good point. Definitely the economic incentive is going to be strong enough that once they start seeing their neighbors receive remittances for practically cents or even free, then of course they're going to want to jump in on that. So the very first use case is going to be remittances. And then you're going to get to a point where people are going to receive the money in Bitcoin, and they're going to be like, you know what, I'll just hold on to the Bitcoin because I could just go to the store and then use it tomorrow or in a few days. But that requires Bitcoin to stabilize a little bit. The other thing is people could also, people could buy Bitcoin. They could purchase it maybe monthly if they have extra savings. Or at some point, what you're starting to see here in the US is, again, through this Strike app, is that people are choosing to get paid in Bitcoin. So now you see a lot of athletes that say, we're going to get our signing bonus paid in Bitcoin, or we're going to get our advertising, our ad revenue with Adidas or whatever other companies paying them for that. They're going to get paid in Bitcoin. So now people are starting to get paid in that, not just buying it, but also getting paid in it, and potentially holding it, potentially selling it. It doesn't really matter, but just you're building this entire ecosystem around it.
Right. Yeah, but it's gonna take time, right? Because I feel like those use cases about, hey, I'm getting paid in Bitcoin or seem to be maybe outliers, very elitist. I was just listening to how folks, a lot of folks, blue collar farmers, they want to see, dollars, right? Pay me in cash. And so I think it's that comfort level that's going to have to, even if I think the remittances is, the key, right? The first gateway. It's easy to understand, but it's going to take a while for folks to understand. The younger folks, I think, will get it quicker than the older folks, but it'd be interesting to see what that demographic looks like, right? And how they approach, maybe they start with the younger folks and like you said, the athletes, and then the next wave of adoption, they start seeing, those athletes and young folks and those remittances coming in at a lower price, from their neighbors. It'd be interesting to see what kind of strategy they have for adoption, right? Which is what we're talking about.
Yeah, and I think a lot of those questions will be answered in maybe 6 months, maybe a year after we see it play out here. So that's why, again, all eyes on El Salvador. And for the first time, all eyes in El Salvador for a positive reason, not because of MS-13 and not because of corruption and not because of like military shooting people. So, I see it as a benefit for not just for El Salvador, but just for Latin America, that it's putting Latin America on the map, saying, hey, Latin America for a long time has been at the mercy of the IMF. Here's one small country trying to change that, and let's see if it succeeds. Maybe they chart a different path and they provide other countries different options for breaking out of that stranglehold that the IMF has and the World Bank.
Agreed. I think you need to try. I mean, I got to give Bukele, right? My mindset's the same. You just can't keep you just can't keep hitting the wall and expect different results, right? So I at least praise him for trying something innovative. Even if it's just trying and failing, right? They're in a situation. A lot of Central American countries, Mexico, right? They're in situations where, just trying something different gives you a breath of fresh air, right? Yeah. And so we can definitely give them kudos for that. I think, just going back real quick to, the Bitcoin market or just looking at where the price is going. I think the 400 coins are not much, even if you buy 1,000 coins. But I think it's just more from a speculative nature, right? If they start getting rid of their coins, the market speculatively will get antsy to say, hey, this is supposed to be our first test, right? And these guys are, moving those out. They're not really keeping reserves or not transacting. I mean, I think 400 coins in El Salvador is like having 400,000. Maybe I'm exaggerating, but you get my point there, right?
Yeah, but I'm not as concerned about it, just because I think that's already been factored in, that people may get the Bitcoin and immediately turn it into dollars, and I think that's okay. I think what you could see tomorrow is a big dump of Bitcoin, but that big dump could come from people that are buying right now because of this type of sentiment, where you have all of these high profile,
the news, right?
Exactly. You have all these high profile people saying tomorrow everybody buys $30 worth of Bitcoin. Well, that collectively could make the price go up to maybe 55 or even 60. But then after tomorrow, people start selling because they're just buying the news, sell the rumor. And exactly. You could see a crash because of that. And look, we could see another 50% correction in Bitcoin. It could go back down to 10,000. It's very unlikely at this point, but it could happen. I mean, there's a small chance that Bitcoin does not succeed at all. So there's always that risk. But there's also the chance that Bitcoin keeps going up and eventually it stabilizes and people feel comfortable enough holding it and then just trading it between peer-to-peer as it's meant to be, without having to worry too much about converting it. So again, that's why this experiment is as you mentioned, he's pioneering something, and it's good that he's trying something new. Again, I think the people from El Salvador it's very little risk for them, because as we mentioned, in this initial phase, they're just going to be using Bitcoin for the ability to transfer value. And most of them are going to be checking out of Bitcoin right away. But that's okay, because I think the more countries that see it succeed that way, the more adoption. And imagine if like other countries start adapting it in Latin America, and then you already have Nigeria where it's, I think, the country in the world where Bitcoin usage is the highest of all countries in the world. You have a lot of African countries that could benefit from this too. So it could start up really small, and then just slowly, then suddenly, if enough countries start getting into it. But again, it really depends on how it plays out in El Salvador for the next few months.
It's pretty interesting to be in the, I guess, the emergence of a financial revolution, right? And I know this is what you shared in the past, that part of the intent behind Bitcoin is to have this decentralized peer-to-peer network exchange, transfer of value, which is great. Obviously, there's a lot of unknowns. I also think that those was interesting because at this point, it feels like it's almost like finding gold. Like there's an acknowledgement, okay, who finds gold first and who can get to it, who can mine it, who can own it, and it's something that's valuable. And I know that the Fed and some of the other financial institutions that you've referenced today, I know they're already tackling this issue of how you regulate it, or what's the impact going to be on the dollar, or if what happens in El Salvador. And thank you for bringing the African perspective too. Like that could basically change monetary policy at a global scale, and I think that would be that could lead to a lot of other positive developments too, particularly if they're done right. So I think appreciating this conversation as someone who is crypto shy. I mean, I understand it conceptually, but I think, like, similar to the dollar, right? It's only as valuable it's only as valuable as the faith that you have on that particular currency and what it stands for. So I'm excited to see what El Salvador does and how this use case develops. So thank you both for sharing your passion for the cryptocurrencies.
Yeah, I think real quick, I think one thing to look forward to is a follow-up. I know we have, I'll look into the geothermal and renewable energy aspect for the mining, right? I'm going to look into that. Then I think we can also have a follow-up discussion on the value of the dollar, right? Just as a store of value in Bitcoin, as you mentioned earlier on. Right now, El Salvador is using the dollar, right? But the dollar, they're really at the mercy of the United States and what they do economically, right? Just keep printing money. So I think a follow-up on that would be great. We should dive into, how does this, impact just the overall macroeconomics of how Salvadorians are securing their future, right? Yep. And storing value beyond beyond the dollar, and something that's a little bit more agnostic, like Bitcoin, right?
Yep, exactly. Definitely. That's really one of the benefits behind it. I know Bukele doesn't come out and say that because he has to walk a tightrope. He doesn't want to upset his current partners, his current financial business dealings that he has with the current institutions. But in one form or another, he's hedging against the fact that they don't have their own national currency. They're at the whims of whatever the U.S. does, and what the U.S. has been doing for the last 2 years is running the printing press like if there's no tomorrow.
La casa de papel, tío.
La casa de papel.
Yeah. So
it's a whole nother conversation, right?
Yeah, definitely. So, hey, great conversation, guys. Thanks for all the questions and the input. We'll wrap it up. For any of you out there that enjoy our content, make sure to check us out. We are Brown Perspective. Estamos on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. Nos vemos.